Welcome. It is what is called my birthday. So in the old calendar, we have August 22nd, 2024. Now, I don't know exactly how the calendar works. There's probably like there's competing anthropologies, right? We're on a certain calendar. Everybody agrees pretty much. But where is it starting from, right? Is it starting from when Jesus was born or when he died or something like that? We know it has something to do with Jesus. But I don't know what I expected to find here. Do you ever go and look at your birthday on Wikipedia? I really recommend doing this. This is really fun. Basically, what the practice that I'm doing here, and that I advocate you do as well, involves something like among other things, building up a personal lore. I think in a big way, the question is, how does my lore interact with your lore? So the stuff that we both care about, that's like going to be in both of our it's going to be in both of our experiences, right? So yeah, so that's the kind of thing people disagree about. But let me make sure I do the screen sharing right, because it actually turns out I don't do this all the time. Okay, I think it's working now. Okay, so as I was saying, do you ever go and look at your birthday on Wikipedia? Not only does it tell you different, I could be like an advertiser. I should have like I should be a sponsor for Wikipedia, right? Anyway, it's a great website. What can I say? At least for now. So, funnily enough, it's the 234th day of the year, which means 237 is coming up. So just in terms of my personal lore, I've been memeing about this. I forget. There's an important tweet from Miss Boucher, by which, of course, I mean the recording artist, often known as Grimes. It's funny. What am I trying to Google? It's so funny that I expect things to work out. You didn't see the first one, so you don't know. But anyway, I'm talking about this person, right? So I mean, this is a big, it's a big mess, right? So what I'm presenting to you is a big mess, right? And I'm aware of that, but this is just how I need to do it. And I'm trying to do it in a way which is it's information dense, I'm hoping, and I'm trying to keep it entertaining or whatever, like light. So if anybody has the patience for this, thank you. Anyway, but so I'm really interested in Grimes because of Miss Anthropocene. And then the other thing that I wanted to say by way of introduction is that this is what's called like an entry point. Oh dear. I don't know. I don't mean a game. It's a problem. Entry point. Maybe if I say definition. I guess so. I mean, a point of entry, right, for a house is like a place where you can go in the house. So, right, what we're doing right now is we're chilling outside the area of like shit that I want to tell you about, right? But so, like, the question is, how are we going to make our entrance, right? That's what introduction means as well. If you look at the etymology of introduction, I just want to, I don't know, demonstrate this and also follow the train of thought that I am, right? So, like, bring into existence, right? So introduction. So okay, but so we're already back to problematic topics, right? So we have Grimes associated with let's type Grimes Nazism. Let's see what comes up. Grimes has to respond to critics labeling them a Nazi. Grimes happily proud of white culture. It's like, okay, so we have a lot of shit going on here. So like, but the thing is, no matter what entry point, so like I brought up Grimes. I'm going to talk to you about Grimes. Like the whole title of this video, right, is the AE symbol. Like I got that from Grimes, basically. It's not something that Grimes invented, obviously. It's like it's an established letter. But the reason why I associate that letter with myself and a calendar that I made is because of this person. But so that just shows you how much in the world is arbitrary. So you make a sort of arbitrary decision and then you stick with it. And it's a sort of point of creative inspiration. And by reinforcing it and reinvigorating it, like it becomes a ritual, basically. But it's a lot, it can have aspects that are, it's like our time, right? It has aspects that are very concentrated, like in terms of time passing, right? We have the new year, right? And we have holidays. I'm trying to think of like when it's like a specific time of day because of scheduling, because of media broadcasts, right? That sort of time we might note, prime time. Um, but on the other hand, we track time all the time, right? So let me show you. I should be able to. I should be able to show you my calendar. I mean, it's not such as it is, right? I think it has some. Is this? Uh-oh. Can I do it or not? Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, because basically I haven't really explained the basic setup. So there's this thing called the AE symbol. That's like what we're here to explain. The topic sentence basically of this show is AE. So I started talking about, my birthday because it's my birthday, right? August 22nd is like my government birthday or whatever. But, it's an interesting thing once you make your own calendar because it's like, how long is a year really? Like, should I really go by, like, if you really start thinking galactically or whatever, or even beyond, like, how should we measure time? Like, should I really measure the amount of time that I've been alive, whatever that means? Like by the amount of times like a random planet has gone around a random star. But then you think like, what else would you measure it by? And whatever else you measure it by would be just as random. It's not to say you shouldn't choose something else, by the way. I'm not saying there's no. The whole point I'm saying is that there, like once you think past this, and it's like, oh, like there's reasons why we label things in this way, but like it could be different. Like you start to realize, I mean, there are different calendar systems, right? There are different calendar systems anyway. But actually, like I invented my calendar, just to be clear, before Miss Boucher tweeted about the light ages. First of all, I never call like my calendar the light ages by choice. Like, I'm not calling it that, right? Like, I'm not here to tell you about the light ages. Like, that's some fucking metaphysical colorist bullshit. Like, I went to a Unitarian Universalist church, or maybe I don't know where I've been reading it, but like, I like to read like Afro-pessimism and like argue with it a lot. But like, I think it's interesting. So I don't know if you're familiar with Afro-pessimism, but there's a thing. It's about anti-blackness. So basically, you don't have to know that much about it just to know that like talking about light and dark, like talking about things in these terms, can carry some weight. I mean, it's not always wrong, but like it should be acknowledged that in terms of light and dark, like there are what we call racial connotations. Anyway, so especially given, I mean, but the thing is, like, there's no, like, what am I supposed to say? Like, the reason why I like this person is because of this. So it's like, I don't believe in this idea of like, oh, we separate the art from the artist. Like, the reasons why I like Miss Anthropocene, and I like to say it that way, people think I say it wrong. But the reason why I like Miss Anthropocene is not different than the rest of this person's life. Like, this person, right, is associated with this person. I've talked about this on previous streams. I'm like not even going to use the name. Like, I guess if you can't see, like the CEO of Tesla or whatever, I guess I just have to be clear. Elon Reeve Musk, right? Born June 28, 1971. And of course, in case you weren't aware, Miss Boucher was born on March 17th, 1988. Anyway, so Miss Anthropocene. I liked this. I actually didn't find this by following Grimes. So I'm telling a bunch of different stories at the same time, so apologies, but like that's just how this whole thing works for now anyway. So I got into this because of Misanthropy, which is actually interesting because I finally watched The Whale yesterday. And like, which is interesting because Mother is like my second favorite movie. This movie, Mother by Darren Aronofsky. See, this is why I literally can't finish talking about one thing. It's amazing. But so yeah, there's Mother, but then this person also made The Whale, right? Which you probably heard about because Brendan Fraser came and Brendan Fraser played somebody who was morbidly obese and everything. But Darren Aronofsky, right? Same person. So where was that coming from? Oh, there was a thing in the movie where like this person's trying to bond with their daughter or their child, right? And the child is very angry at everybody, and and then the person is like gives their child a note and is like, just write anything you want. I just want to know about you. It's actually very beautiful, right? But then, so this person writes, the child writes, I hate everyone, right? And the person who writes this is like 16, and it's a really interesting and touching dynamic of the movie that this person really like the person who's the parent, this really morbidly obese person played by Brendan Fraser, right? Who's also dying, wants to connect with their child before they die a little bit. Is just so happy, like the thinking about the emotions, not even just judging the character, but just thinking about the emotions of like being grateful to know anything about somebody at all. Like it's a very interesting dynamic because we can be very cynical, right? People can be very cynical, like we're gonna kill each other because of the Hobbesian trap, right? Like we're all gonna, you're gonna you're gonna ready to kill everybody because like you hate them and fuck everybody. Because we're all so cynical, and people are going to die because of climate change, and we don't trust each other, and we're going to hack each other's minds with Neuralink, or we're going to kill each other with mini drones and live off of like computers or fine technology, replace people to the point where you can kill everybody, right? And it's just going to keep going. Like there's that aspect where it's like, this is like bleak. I kind of think about it like it's a Hunger Games or it's a battle royale, which people probably know from Fortnite, but I don't know if you know about this movie called Battle Royale, which is like intense, where there's like basically they take it's like Hunger Games, basically. This is the precursor where they take a bunch of kids and they basically make them kill each other in order to survive, or they all die. So basically, like, or it's also like Highlander. Like we could be literally entering into techno Highlander, where it's like only one person can survive because we're going to extend the lifespan, and at the same time we're going to distrust each other, and the fewer people there are, the more the distrust dynamic is going to be heightened among the people who are left. And then the thing with nominalism and like our values and stuff, like the thing is to point out like our values actually don't build trust. Like when we actually face very extreme situations in terms of the application of technology, like that a lot of people don't want to think about. But in terms of like actually thinking about what is making the world go around and what is the most important stuff, like secret technology, military, like what keeps a country together, right? In terms of like nation building, what actually keeps people together, which actually brings us back around, right? Because this person wants to know about their daughter, right? In the whale. And what the daughter says is, I hate everyone. And like and this person like teaches writing or whatever. And we're slowly cascading. It's like Inception, right? It's like Inception. We're like cascading back up through the dream levels. So come with me. As I'm telling you, I was like talking to the movie and I'm like, you need to tell this person about misanthropy. Like, if you hate everyone, like there's a career in that, right? Like you could be a philosopher of misanthropy. And that made me start thinking about like a screenplay where like the daughter or the child or whatever like is obviously coping, and then the other people can still be around, and maybe they're learning to tell their story or something like that. Sorry, where was I going with that? I missed it. Oh, right. And so they're a philosopher of misanthropy. And like that would just be a really funny character to follow around. Like it's somebody who's like high functioning in the sense of like they teach classes, they talk to people, like they do all the things. They could even like present at conferences. But like their official position is like, I hate everyone. Like I'm pro misanthropy. I don't just they could do a philosophy and a historicity of it. They can like study it. Like there's a lot to it, right? There's a lot. People have been hating everybody else for a long time. So like you're in good company, basically. So I was like hoping that this person would like tell their child that in the movie. I mean, I guess it makes sense that they didn't. But when I had my own, I was thinking about misanthropy because basically if you to put a long story short and like to make an embarrassing story like a lot less embarrassing but still kind of like anyway, you can get over invested or whatever in like a person, and then when something with somebody doesn't work out, like you can then be, it's like, well, now there's nobody, right, that I'm trying to relate to or something like this. Or yeah, and it doesn't even have to be like a romantic relation. I think it could happen a lot, where it's just like you have one relationship which is really like your main, I don't know, like if you think about it, it's like there's a lot flowing back. There's just it's a very strong relationship, right? And then if you lose that, then it's almost like, oh, okay, then I basically have no social bonds. And then being that disconnected from people, I definitely I think I definitely notice jealousy. There's like, I think people talk, it's the kind of thing people talk really negatively about. Like there's like a lot. There's jealousy, and then there's like people will be like, oh, your mother or whatever, your parent didn't love you enough as a child. And people always say this shit in this snarky, like bullying way, like they're rubbing it in, when like probably all of us, like we have adverse childhood experiences, and there is no perfect upbringing, and like different things can be whatever. And so that means a lot to us, especially when we're young, right? It has everything to do with like how we turn out and everything. But it's just funny how we wield this in this like very counterproductive way. Like it's very Hobbesian trap, It's like if you bring up it's not always true, right? And this gets back to, the whale, basically this like sentimentality, like we want to know about each other. There is an aspect where, we're desperate to know about each other. Like, but it's interesting how those two things go together. It makes you curious. Like it's the kind of thing, again, we're back to, questionable topics. I forget. We opened up a bunch of Grimes and Nazism tabs, right? So like the whole thing about like a National Socialist, a Third Reich army, SS, whatever, like person running Auschwitz. I mean, that's what freaking Zone of Interest is about. In case you're not aware, Zone of Interest is this movie that came out a couple of years ago, which is basically all about the people who run Auschwitz, and their house is right next to Auschwitz and stuff like that. Auschwitz. So what was the point of this? Basically it's basically a crazy contrast where it's like you will literally be part of an industrial process of murdering people, and then like not 200 feet away, you have your children, you have your family that you love or whatever, you know what I mean? And like, what do you mean? How does that happen? And then, I mean, when I'm watching Zone of Interest, while we're on the topic, I think about like first of all, I'm half German. Like I have, ancestors, or my grandparents, right? Or grandparents' ancestors, technically, I guess, but it's pretty close ancestors. My grandparents were raised in the Third Reich, and we'll just leave it at that for now. But like, what's the point? Like, when I was watching this movie, I'm like, oh my God, how could they do this? Like, when I was watching the movie, I was like, that's exactly how like I feel. Like that's like, it's not necessarily like this moral, like I don't know. It's obviously a big moral issue, but it's also sort of like an emergency. I got the perfect thing. I didn't mention this. Basically, Grimes also talks about there being a calendar that starts 2 years ago. So specifically like 2023. So what's known as 2023 would be, according to Miss Boucher calls this year zero. No, this doesn't have anything on it. Right. 2023 becomes year zero, right? It will improve morale. See, this is fucking hilarious. Oh man, it's tough. Like, so I mean, my official position, right, is that Miss Boucher is like, I mean, not the world's leading artist, because you can't undersell yourself in a way, if you know what I mean. But Miss Anthropocene, in my opinion, is like a world historical work. Like there's like The Godfather, and there's like the Beatles, or I guess what's a different example? Like the Mona Lisa, right? Like what the Mona Lisa, I mean, whatever. People disagree about everything. But like I really, 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 really like this album. And like we will do a deep dive on it. And I guess that's tangentially related to this. This is the fundamental topic, which is AE. But so why do I use AE? I guess now I've shifted. There's a bunch of things I used to be talking about, but maybe we'll get back to them. So Miss Boucher, right? Grimes. It's like this one. We have CNN. Yeah, see, this is how we knew. You know, the people, there was blood in the water. You know, like I don't really know what's going on between either of these people. I wish a lot of people well. Okay, I wish Jabberjaw well. Okay, people say I know Haunted Scuba Guy. Okay, I know Haunted Scuba Guy. Okay, I used to live in an underwater. Right, I used to live in an underwater, and I knew. I wish a lot of people well. Okay. Anyway, not in particular. I don't particularly like. I don't know. You like these people are both performance artists. This one makes a little bit more sense to me than this one. But equally, for example, like in terms of the political, start to lay out the political platform of this podcast, right? Which is like in terms of natalism, like the official position of this podcast is like people can do like what they want to do or something. Like people should never make pressure on people to have children, which I think a lot of people basically do. I basically think it doesn't matter. Like in terms of like, I'm not concerned about a falling birth rate, and I don't think people should feel pressure to like have children. But on the other hand, like if you want to get into, you know, pessimistic reasons, you know, don't do that to the kid, or you want to get into like, I forget what else. I mean, you could get into religious reasons. You know what I mean? Like the incarnated world is evil. You know, if you want to get into Gnosticism, I don't know. You can get into a lot of reasons not to have children. Like, I wouldn't try and convince somebody not to have children either. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't try and convince somebody whatever they wanted to do. If I felt like they were being pressured, I would try and bring that to person's attention and like, you know, whatever. But anywho. Point is, like, these people had a kid. So, and the person that has, well, the first one, because the second child also has this character in their name in a really interesting way. So this person's name is XAEA12 or whatever. So like, okay. But then the second one, they may have like changed the name. Maybe they call this person Y now. They have X and Y. You know what I mean? Like, and then the third one is not Z, but Techno Mechanaeus or something like that. There's a lot going on. It's the kind of thing where it's like, you know, you have a friend where it's just like, you know, like you'll defend them, right? Like you won't like act embarrassed, or like if people like give them a hard time, you'll definitely like, I mean, I'll try. Not necessarily, again, Reeve, we'll put it that way. But you know, but like this person, like the one that I think is like such a great artist, like I don't even judge really, because it's like, what do I know? But it's like just the things that I have to talk about. But the thing is, it helps with me because like even in my story, the Nazis, for example, were going to come up, right? They were going to come up anyway. So it's like we're going to have to talk about Nazism. And in terms of this AE symbol, I went and tried to figure this out because, of course, this is associated with like Norse runes, right? Yeah, we can find this. Right, this one. Right? So I don't, just to be clear, like before, this is a funny thing. But it's like, you know, I'm not super like into runes, but like since then, a lot of shit has come to light, right? A lot of shit has come to light. I think it's the kind of thing a lot of people have been thinking about. I don't know, like, and it's a concerning thing. What is his name? Guido von List. There's this thing called basically esoteric Hitlerism, right? It's like, this is where, yeah, we're gonna have to get into this shit. And like, I'm not necessarily, I don't know if you will think that I'm qualified to do this. I'm not sure if you trust me on this, but it's like, as far as me, like, what I want to do here is just show you shit that I think is interesting and like tie it together. And overall, this is a creative project. So like in terms of like what I'm doing, like why I chose this and everything, like that has to do with basically a grand style. It's basically like basically branding. So it's like if I'm going to do branding, like this is what I decided so far, right? Like this is the brand. I'm introducing you to like the brand, but like what the brand is basically world processing. It's basically like looking at everything that's important to look at and considering all these like topics, like how we don't trust each other and like what does bind us together. And these are just like movies that I like. I mean, Mother. The reason why I like Mother so much is that again, it's about creation. Like basically in this movie, there's a person who writes a poem, which everybody loves so much that they come to the house because they want pieces of the house as relics, right? So it basically is talking to me about the formation of a religion or like the coming together. And again, you know, we're going to political theology, for example, which is again associated with the Nazis, right? Through Carl Schmitt, right? But this can also just mean the ways in which, you know, the ways like the way we govern power, you know, has to do with religion, right? I mean, the Egyptian pharaohs, right, were gods, and like that's often been the case. So it's, I mean, it's not like what I mean by political theology or whatever, you know, has not like was not invented, right, by Carl Schmitt, but is a popularizer of the term, right? Forget where I was going with that. But basically, like it's the formation of a religion, which is similar to like the foundation of a nation. I actually have I pulled out some books, which I guess are relevant. There's this passage I got memorized. Kind of fits the occasion. I don't have a passage memorized, but I'm basically talking about this. But there is like nation building, and I haven't read this book, by the way. Like I don't want to front in terms of like I've read a book that I have. That's not the point. Like I'm not here to tell you like I know everything about this. Like I'm here to tell you. I'm here to like introduce you to a bunch of shit, and like you can go figure this shit out for yourself, right? But this is basically what's going on. Is that like we have a big problem where we don't trust each other, but at the same time we do kind of care about each other. It's interesting, right? Like we live in this world where it's like, nuclear weapons, and like the CIA runs whatever, like whatever. Who knows what the fuck happening? But like I don't fucking know, right? And like I think there could be a nuclear war and I could die and I don't know what I'm going to do. This is what I'm trying to do about it, right? This is my attempt to address the problem that I could die in a nuclear war. Is that I'm trying to like bring up issues and like whether that means everyday people, like whatever your security clearance is, right? Like if you have one, spoiler alert, I do not have one. But like whatever your clearance level is, right? Like if these kinds of ideas are percolating you, if you're thinking about the issue, like I have a problem, right? Like I'm inspired, like I'm concerned about the state of the world, but I don't want to what do we say, you know, I don't want to fight anybody about it, you know. And so I'm being creative, and it's like, okay, so I'm being creative, and then it's like, well, okay, I'm inspired by this thing called grand style, and there's this piece of art. So basically the point, I never fully tied this together, but you know, we were talking about misanthropy, just the idea. That's how I initially got off on the tangent of talking about the whale, right? Because basically I don't know if they spelled out misanthropy, but in freaking the whale, you know, the child is misanthropic. That is what it is. If you hate everyone, then you are misanthropic. Like that's what that kind of means, right? A misanthrope or misanthropist is someone who holds such views or feelings, right? The general hatred, dislike, or distrust of the human species. Okay, but I mean, you could also be fearful of animals. Like this is again where I feel like speciesism and humanism. Like I miss me with that human bullshit. Like in terms of like one of the best things, for example, about Afro pessimism is that it is skeptical of humanism. I mean, a lot of people are skeptical of humanism, but like Afro pessimism is something I can get behind. Where basically like you're constructing this category of like people, and then like for a long time, like in European colonialism, you set in through this idea that black people are slaves and that slaves in a way are not people. You're not human, right? And I mean, for this connects to nope. I wonder if this one is up there. No. I'm trying to show you some Baudrillard now. Fuck yeah. So there's Baudrillard. Let me make sure I remember the subhuman thing in Baudrillard. Right. So Baudrillard basically has a part of the symbolic exchange in death where he's talking about like people struggling against the condition of being subhuman. So my hypothesis is that there has never been a genuine class struggle except on the grounds of this discrimination. Subhumans struggle against their status as beasts, against the abjection of the caste division that condemns them to the subhumanity. This lies behind every strike and every revolt, and today it is still behind the most wage-related demonstrations, hence their virulence. Having said that, today the proletarian is a normal being. The worker has been promised the dignity of a full human being, and moreover, in accordance with this history, in accordance with this category, he seizes onto every dominant discrimination. He is racist, sexist, and repressive. As regards today's deviants and whoever is discriminated against, no matter what their social standing, he has sided with the bourgeoisie and the normal human being. How true. The fundamental law of this society is not the law of exploitation, but the code of normality. So obviously, like Baudrillard and Afro-pessimism, they're not going to gel together. So again, we're doing syncretism, right? Oh man, there's just so much to this. But basically, yeah, we're doing syncretism. So which means we're building things together. So I mean, we're going to wind up building everything together. So I mean, these things do go together, and they do seem similar, right? Like there are people who are subhuman. For Baudrillard, it is, again, like look at the idea that it's normal for a human being to like be discriminatory, and like people have always talked about, oh, we're human and whatever, but like people that like colonialism has been going on, right? And like people speak derogatorily, not even just that, like in terms of sexual politics, like the way people have discussed others, like I don't know, this idea of humanism, or like this fantasy. I guess I'm in my head I'm responding to something like, the idea that we just need like ethno homogeneity or something. Like people who are like into ethnicity or like focused on genetics or something like this. And it's just sort of like, regardless of who you get rid of, whatever population that is still there is going to have these sorts of endemic issues in terms of like, oh, it's just considered normal to be shitty to people, right? And even to the point of like real bad, because you can have this fantasy of like, oh, like especially right now, like what a crazy fucking century, right? Because we have the population of the earth is still very large, right? In terms of like the population of the earth, we haven't had a mass casualty. I mean, the World War II was a mass casualty event that affected like the growth rate of the, like it affected, like there'd probably be a lot more people officially or whatever if you just extrapolate the birth rate or something. But, in terms of what we're looking at, like, I mean, I think the person was misquoted, but somebody was saying that, we're on track for a lot of people to die in this century, and potentially in the billions, right? Because of the sorts of emergencies that we're running into. So if it's at the level where an emergency is going to kill billions of people and we're making political decisions now about how those deaths are going to be allocated, that's not that different than actually just killing people, right? Like if there's different things that we could try, like if there are, anyway. So I don't know how I'm getting off on this, but it's just sort of like, especially like when we consider so much of the time, the limiting factor is like people won't go along with that. This idea of the norm, the things that people have internalized. And so I think this basically has a lot to do with what Afro-pessimists are talking about when they're talking about like the world. Messianicity. What's that person's name? Andrew Kaplan. Like this essay, is it going to come up? That's not it. Maybe this is it. Yeah, like I've talked about this on the radio before. So like, I mean, this shit is very interesting. Like, I'm not saying I'm co-signing off it or whatever, but like a lot of it's very interesting, and like I don't sit back and judge like I know like what's right or not. I'm just saying like I think there's stuff I get from this which is very I vibe with that I like don't get from other things. but I'm not saying you need to accept the whole thing or something. It's like that thing where it's like you need to be able to entertain ideas without accepting them. Anyway, I submitted for your approval, right? Or submitted for your consideration, right? So I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? The human other is black. Anyway, so the long story short was that you can mismake human shit. Like, already uses the word human unironically, like too much for my taste. Like, I'm not shitty about it. Like, if people want to talk about it, like, I do want to talk about why the word is limiting, but I want to talk about why all words are limiting. Like, that's why I'm a nominalist, right? I mean, I'm not a nominalist, but that's why I use the word nominalism or whatever, because like this has a lot to do with what I'm talking about. That like the words that we use don't really express what's going on. I'm repeating a lot of things anyway, but because like things are ineffable, like things can't actually be put into words. So therefore, like the labels that we use are basically like ad hoc, like we use them for practical purposes, but they don't necessarily reveal. They don't cut the world at its joints. In other words, there's this thing called cutting the world at its joints, which basically means like there's even a whole other thing called natural kinds, right? This is another way of talking about this same thing, which is basically the question of like, are there real, like, do we discover or invent the categories that we use? Like, are there really different red things and we tease that out? Color is actually a good example, or there's different, the things that we call red, they just have this common appearance to us, but they don't necessarily share a quality or something like that. But this goes very far because you do have to take this to the point where you're doubting very basic categories. You know, like you're basically saying every concept is unspecified. And whenever I say something, it can be misleading because the things that I say imply that I believe things or that I know things. But that's just how we use language in a way. Like it would be hard for me to use language in a way where I wasn't, acting like I know what I'm talking about because we have to use categories. You're like, I'm putting things into categories even by language about how it can be misleading to put things into categories. So that's an interesting aspect. But, in general, like we can be really convinced that we're carving nature by its joints, right? Like, for example, we're talking about countries, right? We're talking about the United States and Russia and China, right? And so we think that we are carving nature. This is not exactly nature. Like this would be like, is the sun different than the moon? Like, is there really like an object which is the sun? Like, and is there an object which is the moon, or is there basically an alternative? In case you're wondering, like what else would be the case? There's something called mereological nihilism. This is so great. And it's like, Adam, you're not on topic, or AI or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but it's my birthday. So we're going to get back to this. But anyway, this is basically saying there are no objects with proper parts. So like basically you should consider the world as a whole. And actually that has something to do with Hegel, right? While we're on the topic. Something like that. No certainty must be some sort of intersection between thought and being. All-inclusive whole. Oh, okay. Being is yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I'm of course quoting Wikipedia, but I mean, what are you going to do? According to Hegel, being is ultimately comprehensible only as an all-inclusive whole. So what I'm comparing that to this mereological nihilism, which is basically saying things are simples. Yeah, but I think that the issue with mereological nihilism would then be, what is the nature of the simples? Like it says they don't have any proper parts, but like what are their attributes? Because then that describes in a way like the way in which everything fits together. But so between these simples, which can't really be defined, but would have to be defined in terms of everything, between that and everything, that makes sense in a way. But to gather things into categories, it makes a lot of sense, but it can be very misleading. Like basically, this has everything to do, for example, with what Ben Zweibelsen's talking about with the Newtonian fetish. It makes me feel silly to talk about because it sounds so silly to say. Like there's a sense in which there are not discrete objects. Like there's a way in which this book is not different than this book, is not different than me, is not different than this book. Like, but I mean, that's also the kind of thing where you're doing, like Zeno's paradoxes, right? Where you're like denying motion. It's like I'm not moving, right? Like it's impossible for things to move right now. Like it makes me feel a little silly to like talk that way. But I mean, I think these are interesting ideas to think about. And I mean, anyway. So it's just the commonality is that between these two things, it's interesting ideas to think about, but they are so counterintuitive sometimes, or hard to explain both in a way that is both clear and simple without being, I don't know, just sort of like, I don't know, saying sweeping things. But maybe I can find a different way. I'm learning how to talk as much as I'm learning how to relate these things together. Anyway. Ben Zweibelsen says, Newtonian-styled reasoning, as applied by the military profession toward complex warfare, seeks the universal. Again, and when you hear universal, be thinking problem of universals. Like, it's not that it's like an outstanding problem, like somebody's going to solve this, but like, think about this, like next time you're like taking psychedelics or something like that. Like this has everything to do with nominalism, right? Like the reason, like nominalism is a stance to take about the problem of universals, because the problem should properties an object has in common with other objects, like the red ones from before, be considered to exist beyond those objects, right? And nominalism is like, well, no. Excuse me. But so Newtonian-style reasoning seeks the universal, the general, so that outputs accomplish a timeless quality to cast forward on future unwaged wars, a predictive shadow that also spans in reverse, so that every historical battle is also in keeping with the constructs. At the ontological level, what is and is not war. See, this is... like I've talked about before, I have earlier streams where I'm like, this is in the parlance of the rewatchables, right? Like, oh my God, like Baudrillard's coming in. He's shooting like threes from downtown. Like this is such a cheeky parenthetical aside. Like, I guess it makes sense, but it's just so funny to have like this short little phrase. It means so much. Like the definition of war. Like, in case you're not aware of this, I mean, especially like, but if we're going to talk about, right, like Nazism, if we're going to talk about, ethno-nationalism, right, if we're going to talk about great power politics and, whatever, like the weapon, like just information warfare. I mean, racism and so many of these bigotries, right, like you can think of them as cognitive warfare, right? It's basically like you are like the people who are smart, right? The people who are smart enough to realize that bigotry is stupid, right? Because there is a very important way in which we all do have equal dignity or something. We are equally important. In my parlance, I don't know if it'll come up, which is an issue. Maybe if I put it in quotation marks. No, but it's on. This is where it's like, oh, but it's like, this is why I made my subreddit. Right? Uh-oh. Oh. So what is it I'm looking for? Oh, yeah, infinite reincarnation. See, this is just so much fun. I just get to show you everything. I'm trying to... This is the theme music for this is All of the Lights. Like, I'm giving you the kingdom right here. Like, this is like the greatest hits of all time. Like, this is like... Yeah, like I'm out here talking about nominalism, mereological, right? We're going to have to get into like, the most hot button pressing shit of all time. But we have this like, we're laying out a general context of like philosophy, I'm going meta. I'm telling you what I'm doing. Like I'm trying to use style and like I'm doing this character building, lore building thing to try and like make this set of ideas compelling. And just like the spectacle, I guess, of me and that I'm so invested in this. I don't know. Anyway, we're gonna have to talk about runes, like we have to talk about all and like yeah, it's interesting. Like I wonder how nobody's ever had these tabs open before at the same time in their life. I'll tell you that much. I forget where we were going though, most immediately. But nominalism was involved. That's definitely true. 237. There's an important Grimes or tweet from Miss Boucher that they sent at 237. You will find. This was something somebody posted. Oh, right. I want to show you infinite reincarnation. So in terms of us having equal dignity, right? In terms of the cosmological like point of view, because if you think about it, like what is useful to believe? People don't. There's a certain point. It's interesting because obviously, if you think about what's useful to believe instead of what's actually true, in a way, like that could be delusional, right? In terms of what's useful to believe, like I could be like, oh, that person's still alive, and like spoiler alert, like that person's not still alive, right? Um, but so like if a person is otherwise of sound mind and they just can't acknowledge that, like that would be understood as like, I mean, they're delusional. But like if they don't hurt anybody, like, there's no point in like being super rude about it or something, but like, that's being out of touch with reality, right? In terms of it's useful for me to believe something that's completely not true because it makes me feel better, right? And that can be very selfish, right? Because it's all about me, right? I gotta feel good, right? But then you can also ask from a spiritual perspective, it's not that you're too selfish. It's not that you're hedonistic or that hedonism is a problem. This is funny because Ben Zweibelson actually called me hedonistic, which is just so great. Like, I guess I don't have any interactions with Miss Boucher that are in writing or like online verifiably. But we do have. I wonder if the response is up. I always worry that I'm gonna post a bunch of nuts stuff and then people are gonna like delete their messages to me. So this is at least still up, and now I have this as a screenshot. But like, I guess I didn't even see which one was this in response to. I send so many things. Oh, fetish, animism, and eroticism. Oh, it was in response to this because I took it pretty personally, but in terms of like Zweibelson saying like I'm a hedonist and like I don't do serious work, which is so funny. I mean, you can see, my shame complex. What's happening? But it's funny. I do consider myself to be more. This is me being more productive. Funnily enough, like this is just the whole car crash being documented. But at least pulling these ideas together like that. I don't know. Like I was listening to somebody in The Whale, right? There was somebody who was doing religion, and they were like, if I could just reach one person, and like I feel like I do reach more than one person, so that's pretty sweet. I don't know. I guess that's a very sad movie, so I guess I don't know. I shouldn't get too. Actually, my therapist today was saying that exceptionalism is delusional. But okay, so she's a Lacanian psychoanalyst, but she's saying, don't think that you're exceptional, but everybody's singular. And I was like, okay. So we're gonna have to come back around to that because it has everything to do with a part of Baudrillard, but I feel like I'm levels deep of having missed the mark here. Oh, this is actually cool though because hedonism brings up the idea of axiology, or which is value, the study of value. So I mean, which is funny because like people who call them think enjoy Marx enjoyers, people who overly identify. In my opinion, I mean I don't identify at all, but these people who they might talk about value, right? Price and value and things like this. For example, see Derek Varn. I did want to show people. I might as well show my influences. So there's obviously I talk about Ben Zweibelson a lot, but so you can check out that person. And then there's also C. Derek Varn. Like, this is the person I'm thinking of. So, funnily enough, like C. Derek Varn will talk about. It's really funny because like this kind of tone is really funny. Like, I don't fight your like whatever. Like, anyway, didn't like who anyway. What are we saying? Like, this person will talk about value, but I'm not sure that they'll talk about axiology. Funnily enough. But anyway, axiology is just fun. It's, again, value. And I mean, that's a big thing. Like, I stand Baudrillard. I mean, not stand. Like, I don't identify, but like Baudrillard, I set up, like, in terms of, I keep going back to an archive of every Baudrillard book. Like, I'm going to about a Baudrillard book. Not a great book. Okay. I didn't do a perfect job. Like, let's be 100% real. But for a lot of the things that I want to talk to you about, like, I just come back to this website where, I have all these PDFs. And it's like, wow, that's so great. I wonder who made that. Right? And then on symbolic exchanges, I'm sorry for gloating, but again, it's my birthday, so you don't get to be mad. That's the problem for you. And like, so on the Baudrillard subreddit, like, there's we have that's linked to. That's interesting. I wonder who decided to pin that there. I guess that's like me putting a medal on my own thing, but anyway, I heard it, but the person who controlled it didn't want to do anything with it and let me do it. So it's pretty crazy. Nobody else has wanted to be. I don't know. I guess I haven't advertised it or anything, but I guess that would be another way to meet people. So if you feel like you're exceptionally qualified, you can vibe with all this. Then if you want to be a moderator of the Baudrillard subreddit, then you can hit me up. I'm Forlorn Woodsman, which is funny because I just watched this movie that they kept talking about the woodsman. It's like the woods are real or something. It's like weird. It was like whatever. Anyway, where are we? Singular. So yeah, we eventually want to talk about, now that while we're here, right? What I'm trying to talk to you about is, I believe, in my mind, I'm like, it's amazing that I can do this. I don't know if it's like, I don't know if it's worth doing, but anyway. So what do we have? Poetic singularity. That's what I want to show you. Oh, no. So these will be important to like. Oh no. Oh, great. It is this one. Wonderful. Okay, so this is what I wanted to read you. This is Baudrillard. This is from the Agony of Power. Again, what year is it? Front or check the file name. Of course, Baudrillard died in 2007. So this is, but I mean, when it was written, it's right here, 2005, right? So we could just start here, right? The high point of the struggle against domination, historic movement of liberation, be it political, sexual, or otherwise, a continuous movement with guiding ideas and visible actors. But liberation also occurred with exchanges in markets, which brings us to this terrifying paradox. All of the liberation fights against domination only paved the way for hegemony, the reign of general exchange, against which there is no possible revolution, since everything is already liberated. So, I don't know exactly how to parse this out. Baudrillard has given me a healthy skepticism of this idea of liberation, but I think that there is still more to be said, or, Baudrillard can be contradictory, but it at least gives me interesting. I mean, Baudrillard is a skeptic in general, so it's just sort of like being contrary and saying people are liberated. And maybe it just means like everything can be commodified or something like this. But it continues. That's not the reason why I included it in the passage. It's just healthy context. Total revolt responds to total order, not just dialectical conflict. Uh-oh. At this point, it is double or nothing. The system shatters and drags the universal away in its disintegration. Again, universal, we are thinking about the problem of universals. Do you understand? That is what we are thinking about. We are thinking about the problem of universals right now. Because we read the universal, right? The system shatters and drags the universal away in its disintegration. It is vain to want to restore universal values. Okay, again, we are thinking about universal. We are thinking about does that have a Wikipedia page? Heck yeah. I'm sorry. Was it in question? Anyway, axiology. Right, is the philosophical study of value. So I mean, this is like what is worth doing. This is actually really important. Like, you will not be surprised to hear that I have done. Anyway, I've had altered states of consciousness. Put it that way. I mean, I dream every night, right? And something that I've thought about under such conditions is, what is the point of anything? Like, why? Like, why do I care if not? It's not about caring. It's more so like, what are the stakes? That's really the question. What are the stakes? And that's an interesting thing, because then that immediately makes me think of Afro-pessimism again. But we may have lost the plot on that, because I'm not sure what happened to that. Did I talk about it here? Yeah, raising the stakes. That's the point. And Baudrillard is also always on about this. I don't know. He doesn't quite say raise the stakes here. But the stakes are death without any possibility of negotiation. Other societies have known multiple stakes over birth and kinship, but then the stakes were large, the violence extreme, and hopes too high. Today this is over. The system has rid production of all real stakes. So this is the kind of shit where, remember that person I was talking about before? This is where see Derek Varn. That's who I'm trying to tell you about, but I don't know what I did. Maybe I closed their window. Isn't it surprising that I can't keep anything straight? That's so confusing. Varn. Maybe I closed. So like this person, that's where this person would be like, screw you, Baudrillard. Like, the internet runs on electricity, right? That's what this person says. And then, but with is it here? No, it's not in this. It's in the mirror of production. Like, Baudrillard's defense to that is basically like, he's trying to address, I think, the highest level of abstraction possible. So, I mean, also in this book, you have, this is something I meant to show the other time. What is it? Hierological type, right? So he's quoting Anthony Wilden and System and Structure. I don't know if I can find my version. Like, I have personally uploaded that to archive.org, and I'm like, oh, how am I going to find it? And it's, again, like, this is why I made this subreddit. And so this is what you can do. I mean, it's worth noting, like, I was checking, here I am, by the way, but like today, but like I was just sort of checking or like peeping my accomplishments before. I don't know how far I can scroll down, but like there's a lot of posts here. Like I've made all the posts, and there's just a lot. And like there's a lot of different ones. In the beginning, I don't know if I can get all the way to the beginning, basically, but in the beginning, there was a lot of like military theory and stuff. And we have these. Oh dear. I can't use the labels for some reason. Out of militaricity. No, yeah, we can't really leave. You can't just stop militaricity, by the way. You gotta grapple with it, basically. But militaricity is a cool idea. Anyway, Afro-pessimism is all about raising the stakes as well. And basically, yeah, it raises the level of abstraction. So in terms of, I think, what, oh, sorry, I forgot again what I was trying to do. In terms of like Baudrillard's point there, when he's saying dissent must be of a higher logical type than that to which it is opposed. Like, there's a lot that you could read into that, like that, in terms of what that means. Like, I can tell you what I think and why, right? So there's Bertrand Russell was another philosopher, in case you don't know who that is. This person wrote like the Principia Mathematica or something. It's so funny. This is like the payoff of like my dad asking me for years if I've read things and I haven't, and now I'm just like, here's this, and it's like, I don't know, I haven't read it, but it's related to what we're talking about. Because he, for example, had this idea of a set that doesn't contain itself, the set of all sets that don't contain themselves, and does it contain itself? And basically, by the way that you set up the definition of the group of objects, like it can't logically exist. Either way is contradictory, basically. So then the one response to this, which may... There's something I was... Oh, no, I'll be able to find that with... also, we're on dang old Yahoo. So maybe if I do this, do my usual thing. Yeah, see, this is what I wanted to show you. So a theory posed by Bertrand Russell that rules out self-reference. So that has to do with the set of all selves that contain themselves or not, or whatever. Does it contain itself? So this rules out self-reference in the idea that, you don't ask, you can't contain yourself, or you can't contain a modified version of yourself, right? So you can't refer to the whole thing when you're talking about a part of the thing. Anyway, so that's sort of what self-reference means. There's also another thing called reflexivity, which is interesting because a version of it is associated with George Soros, of all people, is like the... is it Lukeman? Something like that. Reflexivity... I guess it's not only... This might be more broadly, but there's also like... no, not that. Yeah, in economics is an actual promoter of the relevance. Okay, so the relevance of reflexivity, right? So there's just like a thing called reflexivity. It's a lot. People might have come across the term because George Soros, and again, we're back to, controversial topics or whatever, right? So George Soros is known for like applying this to economics. So like the idea that if there's a shock, right? If something happens in the market or whatever, it will have then more cascading effects. So you don't just think about something, and I'm probably not explaining this too well, but you can go look and read about it for yourself, right? But this again has to do with like self-reference. It also comes up in, is it Lukeman? I'm not getting it right. I don't know. I'm trying to think of another, like a book I know this person wrote. Oh, well. I'm a million, whatever, tangents away. But so the point in terms of like logical type and like Baudrillard's point here, like talking about like production doesn't have stakes, right? This is like the argument that I was talking about before. Like I'm reading you about this. All dissent must be of a higher logical type. Or I was reading to you about the thing before, right? Which was talking about the stakes. And it was saying production doesn't have the stakes. And Baudrillard's like, what I think is interesting about Baudrillard, the way that he writes gets you to think really critically, and it gets you to think in a very interesting way about the terms and the topics that he's writing about. But if you really think about it, like, I don't understand like what he wants me to understand by production. Put it that way. Like, even as he's trying to say that other people are misunderstanding production, but I'm not sure I understand what he's saying about production. But I think that his point that other people, a lot of the things that we take for granted, so many of the platitudes, for example, like in the labor movement or whatever, or like on the left, right, that a lot of them are not as relevant as, or not as directly relevant, or they're very general. And once you get into the very specifics of like what they mean, all like people don't talk about that part as much or something. And like in terms of like what are we going, what are we supposed to do, right? Like so much of like what that boils down to comes down to like, oh well, we can't really. It's not a revolutionary moment, right? Sorry, like you can't really do anything, and it's just like the way that you're using words is like discouraging people from doing anything, and like just assuming a bunch of things are closed and impossible and whatever, like just because of the way you're using words. And it's just like I don't believe that. And that's where again where people say things like well, you're just you're liable to repeat problems from the past. Now I'm thinking of Hume. I'm basically thinking about Black Swan event. And I would be saying that, I mean, this doesn't just answer this doesn't answer the point. What I'm trying to say is that if billions of people don't die in this century, like it will involve things that haven't happened before. Like if you just think about it, like the trajectory that we're on, especially like the long-term trajectory, right? It's sort of like if you just think about it in terms of like you have empires. So like there's people, right? We're a kind of animal, like the official position, the official story, right? In terms of like what caused all of this to happen, right? Is that a bunch of animal, like there was a comet that came out of fucking nowhere, apparently, from beyond the Jupiter or something to like hit the Earth of all places. Like if you think about how big space is, like the odds of that happening, I mean, they're obviously in a way they're 100%, right? It happened, right? The comet killed the dinosaurs, and then like in their shadow, like afterwards, here come the mammals, right? And so we evolved after millions and millions and millions, long fucking time, okay? Then there was a special kind of one that could like walk upright, and like there was a bunch of kinds of shit like us that's like different than what we consider animals or whatever. Also, there's a bunch of animals missing from around that time because we fucking killed them all, right? Like we killed them with spears, right? Like you don't have to have an oil rig or something. You don't have to have fucking like climate change. I mean, in a way, it does cause climate change. Like humans were causing climate change even back then, in a way, maybe more subtly. Point of the story is though, like you don't need to have a nuclear bomb, right, to like kill everything. So let that be a lesson to you. But even now, like how much more of a problem do we have now, basically, given the power of our means? That's the main pressure cooker thing, right? That's what makes this an emergency situation. And like if it was a matter of defeating somebody, right? Like that's what anyway. So you have like a war, right? And that's what that's in terms of for me, but also for Baudrillard, like there's in Baudrillard Live, there's a part where he talks about like he doesn't feel like he has any enemies, right? So it's like, where is the space for this position, right? Is there a space when we're talking about politics and we're talking about like radical, like we're gonna do some shit, right? Like if I think about doing publicity stunts, right? But maybe this is a better idea than doing a publicity stunt. This is like a better version. Anyway, what's the point of the story? Baudrillard Live. It's in '93. Like you don't have. Yeah, but this is interesting because like people are always talking about how they don't believe in the friend-enemy distinction. Like this has become such a hot button issue. I wonder if there should be like, I mean, there probably is like an article in the New York Times, right, about Carl Schmitt. Like it's such a moment, right? Because, and this is so funny because again, Carl Schmitt is fucking associated with the Nazi Party because he was part of the Nazi Party, right? And like worked with them and everything. Let's see. 1-1. No enemies. Let's see over here. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So he's saying there are no more enemies. So So Marxism, then political power is like, I guess, who Marxism would consider their enemy. But it's like, that is the problem. That is to say, so in contemporary art, one feels there's no more danger, no dramatic danger. There's no negative dramaturgy of art. There's no longer anything to destroy. That's the problem. That is to say, for the last 20 years, one has joyfully destroyed everything, put everything into question. The economy, man, humanism, power. One has analyzed everything. One has conducted radical critiques of everything. And went very well. There was a system in front of one. Now there aren't any more enemies to receive the radical critiques. Marxism? No. It's been done. Psychoanalysis has almost disappeared here. Political power, well, it exists in a kind of simulation, but one can no longer talk of a class enemy and so on. And that's the real problem right there. Effectively, it is a problem of relativity, funnily enough. Negativity is no longer possible precisely because there is no longer any positivity. So one has, okay, so think about this. Think about how people say Kamala Harris is an empty suit, right? Think like, and a lot of people, wouldn't like that, but also think about think about the fact that like Trump doesn't stand for anything or whatever. Like, and I don't fucking care about this, to be clear. But if you just think, a lot of people care about this, right? And so we're thinking about this, right? If you think about it, right, Donald Trump with the Republican platform or whatever, he wants it to have, or they, right, Donald Trump, they want it to be shorter, right, and more vague, right? It's like, let's not even bother, really being clear about what it is we're going to do. It's not about, knowing exactly it and being a freaking, like nobody cares, right? It doesn't matter anyway, because nobody trusts you in terms of believing what you say, right? If you're like, oh, like we're going to have a big economic stimulus program, like maybe, but maybe, you're going to spend a lot of money and it's just going to go to a bunch of fucking rich people or whatever, or, it's like, okay, it's like keeping some shit alive, but it's just like enough barely beating heart in the middle of society so that like the rest of everybody who's like basically dying of social cancer, is basically just in like hospice, and like in that sense, I see the sort of natalist like perspective, and I don't know, people get very paranoid and very negative and very spiritual, and like if you want to talk about like prison planet and like, anyway, shit is freaking whack, right? But like when I say, there aren't fundamentally enemies, like the point of what I'm trying to say is that like there's nobody where it's like if somebody was like, I mean, in principle, yes, right? Is there anybody where like the world is definitely better off with them dead than them alive? I guess that's just the death penalty, right? I mean, you can talk about that. But I mean, you can talk about, people might not want obviously the person to like be, other people don't want them to be alive, right? But if you think about like that person can still generate value. Like you might say nothing of value is lost, but I mean, that person can still generate data, right? If you just want to think about it that way. Like, so it's not necessarily true that there's nothing left to get out of people. But things like become unpalatable. And plus we don't know how to treat that, right? Like we don't really know how to adjudicate what's a crime. That's why, this stream's about to take a fucking turn. Like in a way, like I'm bad. You know what I mean? Like people, like this is what, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't know how people would think about this. But I'm basically like, legal nihilism is sort of the case, right? Like my whole thing is like, it's tough with Carl Schmitt. Like it even goes before that, right? Like a lot of this is just fucking Hobbes. Like if it's funny. I was thinking about this. I haven't, mentioned, Thomas Hobbes is the reason why there is a Hobbesian trap, right? Oh, also like tying it back to music and my brand and everything for a second. Like I propose, I have a proposition for the musicians, right? The same way that, Miss Boucher might have a proposition for the communists, or may have had one at a certain point of the dream time, right? Part of the every win. But so I propose to the musicians a genre called Hobbesian trap. So it would be a subgenre of trap music, which I guess is associated with hip hop. I don't even know that much. It's just I know it exists, right? I'm operating just purely based off of word association. Oh, nice. Atlanta people. I should try and meet them. That would be funny. But basically, you do trap music that's about the Hobbesian trap, You talk about distrust and the fundamental issues, and that is what we're talking about all the time, right? But we always talk about it in this that's where you'd say, at a low logical type. If you go back to this theory of logical types and this argument that I'm having in my head between Baudrillard and C. Derek Varn, right? It's like I can't mention the person, but it's like Inception. It's like boom, boom, we're still alive. Anyway, Mofrican, basically the keeping everything in mind. Now I'm not sure if I'm remembering where I just was before this, but that's funny. Hobbesian trap music. Yeah, it's like we always talk about like distrust in the sense of like, oh, like you let me down. Like we're always trying to judge whether people are good or bad people. It's like we want to win the game at the level of like processing one at a time. Like how am I going to date people? Like how am I going to find somebody to date? Like I need to go on a bunch of first dates and I need to like hone my learning ability or something. Or like how am I going to choose who to vote for? I don't know, in terms of distrust, right? I mean, it does have a lot to do with political candidates, right? Like people don't trust either one, right? Like in terms of a lot of things, like I don't know, it just depends, right? But people distrust the other side, right? A lot more. Because basically it's like, what are the vibes of the people who are going to run the really powerful machines? And to that point, that's like, it is a level of like who is able to deploy accumulated wealth, right? Who is able to actualize and, bring their will or like make choices basically that like decide how this enormous technical infrastructure will be used. And again, of course, we're back to only a God can save us, right? By, again, Martin Heidegger. But the only reason why I go to that, I don't have to go to this one, but it is Heidegger in general. Again, this idea of technicity. And it's like, I'm not going to this for any reason but this, right? Just the idea of, it's like the question about technology. So it's whether you want to talk about it, we don't need to be sympathetic to Heidegger, whatever, but like, even if you want to talk about it from a social justice perspective, or you want to talk about it even from a Democratic or Republican perspective, right? Because it's like you're talking about the apparatus of the government. You're talking about the NSA, right? You're talking about the imperial. I mean, you don't have to. This is all. You got me talking politics, right? What can I say? But you have all of this machinery and infrastructure, and to my point, like it's not a unitary actor. Which, I mean, people will be like, duh, like, of course it's not a unitary actor. The state is seen as a monolithic unitary. I mean, but if you look at this, right, in terms of rational actor model is based on rational choice theory. I mean, this is just false, right? Like, that's the problem there. So this whole idea of, like, building these models of how people are supposed to behave, I mean, here's the thing. It can also be going on at a different level. Like, it's not necessarily... This is the difference between a weaponized concept and a warfighting concept. So, like, a warfighting concept is a term that you know what you're doing, and you build this in order to like guide your like prosecution, right? The most important shit of all time. This is like your plan. This is your war plan that your council came up with. But no, I forgot. It's a bummer. Warfighting concept. Then there's a weaponized concept, right? So a weaponized concept is a concept that you try to get other people to use, not because you think it's a good concept, but because it's like, it's not even relevant to what's really going on. So if people are fighting about that, then they're not attacking you in the way that is important. That in itself is a simplistic way of framing what I'm talking about. So this is where, again, we need to keep coming back to nominalism and also like everybody's limitations. Like I'm not the best at describing everything. So it can be, just be aware of that. But basically, you tell people like, oh, we're all on the same team, right? But you have a secret plan, right? Where you are going to be the only one who lives, for example. Or, you have a plan, like you're going to kill everybody else there, but they don't know it yet, right? And they just, and like that's where you go into like serial killers, right? And people who are not normal, right? And that is the extreme example, one kind of extreme example that shows you the arbitrariness of the way in which like this sort of trust and trustworthiness works, and the degree to which like deception is possible, right? But then the other degree of that is, of course, this what we call the state, right? But it's not the state. That's like, again, this whole presumption is that there's a monolithic unitary actor, like, which is, again, the United States. We would always talk about like the United States and Russia don't get along. It's like, who's the United States, right? And who is Russia? That is what I want to know. I want to know who the specific people are who are actually like in charge, or not like in charge, but like, how are these decisions actually getting made? Because, I mean, people are calling it out right now because, of course, Joe Biden has seemed not the most firm. But I don't know. Like, I don't know how to put that. Like, Joe Biden has seemed to be in cognitive decline or something like this. So it's like, in a way, but how would I put that? I don't want to pick on that person in particular. Just in a way, like the way people talk about these figures is like, oh, fucking Joe Biden, or people are like, oh, like implicitly, like people say a lot of other things. People use a lot of adjectives, but they basically denounce each other all the time. Like, I'm kind of sick of people denouncing each other all the time, and so that's why I try like not to do that. Like, I probably come across as judgmental in my own way, but like general, like, I don't know, like I use my judgment, like I'm using my judgment to showing you all these, like my judgment is that the law doesn't exist, right? I'll tell you that. But the fact that the law doesn't exist is not a denunciation of any person in particular. Like, so then this is related to, I guess, to like governmentality or something. But so like there's a lot of people who pretend, right? There's a lot of people who pretend that the law means something that it does not mean. And they allow other people to think that. And so in a way, like there's lying going on, right? But like, I'm not here to denounce that lying, because the corollary of that is basically you can't handle the truth protocol. And again, I don't know the truth, by the way. Anyway, you can't handle the truth. It's like good. It's good for me as a radical skeptic, because it's like, well, I mean, truth is unattainable. So, I mean, nobody can handle the truth in reality, because the truth is the sublime. And the truth is that there's nobody there and things of this nature. Oh, gosh. Is this what I want? Anyway. Just the thing, you can't handle the truth. I have a lot of that memorized. I have made I have a SoundCloud, which still has some stuff on it. Oops. That's not what I wanted to do. I keep changing my name, though. That's the problem. But it should be somewhere. Anyway, I have a sound collage where I mixed up a scene from Crimson Tide where Denzel Washington says that the true enemy is war itself. And then I mashed that up with Midnight in a Perfect World by DJ. So midnight, you can also be thinking of the midnight clock. So it's like, again, nuclear doomsday. So yeah, in the nuclear era, the true enemy is war itself. But again, of course, that's paradoxical, because if you're making war your enemy, then you're like fighting against war. So you're still fighting. So it's like, yeah, it's an issue. But that's, again, here I am using conceptual thought, for example, or apparently using conceptual thought in order to, reveal the limits of conceptual thought or whatever. But we're a bit losing the plot. But it's basically like, what is the ultimate issue, right? Like, in terms of the logical order. So in terms of this, right, in terms of like what that means, like part of it is like you could keep your little sibling like at a distance, right? Like if it's like, I don't even know. Almost like you could do to animals or something that, for example, just can't see in the same way that we can. So you can just trick them, right? And you can game their instincts. You know what I mean? Like we can see it when like a trap or like one of those flickering lights, right? That like kills moths, right? In that, it's like you're operating at a logical type that animal in a way can't understand. Like that animal is not evolved. Like that animal has probably existed in that way or something like that. You know, the basic thing that it does, the basic apparatus. There is this idea. What is an apparatus? Just so you know. You know, the basic like no. I guess it's I can't because I'm using Google. Anyway, there's this thing called what is an apparatus. And like the basic way that it works has probably been the same for a very, very long time. So like there hasn't been a bunch of people with strobe lights for millions of years, right? And so I keep seeing my birthday. It's so fun. And I guess I might leave soon because there's like this like DJ show or something. I guess I might check it out. Anyway, I just got completely distracted. With governmentality. The point of this part was basically like there are people who are lying to you about what the law means, but I don't denounce them either. Like, I guess I would say they're liars. It's just in the sense of like, if you say something that you know is not true, like that's why for so many things, you know, you would try to make there be a double meaning. So at least there's a way in which like you mean what you're saying even if it's not the way that the people who are listening to you are understanding what you're saying. But still, if you are knowingly communicating something to people that you know to be false, right? Then I mean, you're a liar, right? I mean, that's what lying is. Not to go all full word definition on you. Again, to the point of, which is also to say, like, I'm a liar, right? Like this, in terms of this designation, like I've done that before. So in terms of like, if we're asking, like, that's again going back to this universals thing. Like we want to label people. Like we just want to know, like, are you a good person or a bad person? Like we're just trying to figure that out so we can put you into this like system of binary categories. It's called splitting, right? Like there's a sense in which this splitting phenomenon is going on all the time, right? Which is where we're like splitting things into good and bad. It's corresponding to our pleasure and pain, which is interesting. Like I was just talking with my friend today about how like for a sage they're supposed to be the same thing, but I mean that's also I mean to we were just I was just over here looking at Ben Swibelson, and I had messaged him about eroticism, and he responded back with something about hedonism, and hedonism is obviously about pleasure. So, I mean, again, I was just saying, like, it's tying back into eroticism. And again, a very salacious topic is pornography, of course. There's actually, like, the thing that I can show you that is, oh, for the Freudians out there, this is my mom's computer, by the way. But so there's this thing called pornosophy. So, I mean, obviously, this is again, I don't know, the sort of thing, but it's just like pornography is obviously a very important part of society. Like pornography is a very popular thing, and depending on your definition of pornography, right, if you a very wide net in terms of what you consider to be pornography, you could say that sex sells, right, in terms of salacious images or titillation, right, is used in very many things. You know, in terms of looking for pornography, right, you can. Like, for example, in case you weren't aware, there's a lot of what are called subreddits. So on the site Reddit, there's different forums, and then there will be whole like categories of posts basically that are dedicated to pornography. In case you weren't aware, but like, so there's like people making movies, right, where they're having sex with each other or something, like where people are actually having sex, and what is called non-simulated sex, which is a funny thing. Or sorry, yeah. So like real sex, right? But then there's also sex like in Hollywood movies, like or there's a topless scene, and how do we think about that? Like how do we think about it? The difference between somebody who like will go topless and if they won't, versus I don't know. But you could also think about, in a way, the pornography of the muscles too, right? There's a Baudrillard, for example, has this basic tendency where he's saying that concepts tend to like explode out, right, and come to refer to a lot of different things. So like I'm thinking in particular of performance. I think Baudrillard says that performance is he associates it most with sports, but he basically saw the idea of performance and everybody tracking their metrics and whatever, getting better. That this sensation is taking over everything. And for a lot of people thinking out there, you're probably like, well, yes, of course, you're always trying to get better and so on and so forth. And it's like there's no issue with that in general. But the question is this our susceptibility to these norms, basically, that like we can have these sweeping cultural shifts and like we're susceptible to this and we're caught in a storm of this. And the other thing that I forget, I guess it's not in this, it might be in a different book. Baudrillard's basically saying we're doomed to repeat everything that we haven't transcended. So like, and this is getting to a good place for me to start to wrap things up. Although I'll try and get back into the key topics, because this is all just very important background context for some things that I have to tell you. What was I saying? Something from Transparency of Evil, I think. Oh dear. Oh dear. I may have forgot. Well, things are exploding. I remember that. The pornography is exploding. But so in the sense of performance, something's going from one thing to another. We're susceptible to these sweeping changes. Oh, right. We're doomed to repeat the things that we haven't transcended, was the quote that I was looking for, telling you about. So if we're doomed to repeat things that we haven't transcended, it almost reminds me of trauma, trauma on an individual level where and there's a lot of different ways to talk about that in terms of what is the definition of trauma. And it's like, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of the topic trauma, right? In terms of what that means to you. I don't know what it means to me even, but like it's a word we use. But so there's something which is associated with that, which is this idea of repetition, right? Which is this idea that, something happened to you and, you're repeating the experience or you're repeating the emotional experience. There's also something called, that's called repetition compulsion, I'm pretty sure. I mean, like I said, I'm not qualified. That might be a good thing. Like, it might be a good thing that I haven't read any of this, because I'm deluded into telling you, like, I'm an authority on this. I'm going to tell you what this really means. Like, the best way to be a nominalist is to focus on generalism. I mean, obviously, people who are specialists, praise be, right? It might be just more difficult to get out of cognitive rigidity when you have such detailed practical experience and like observation of causal pattern, or like seeming causal hazards and everything. But that's not all we have to work through, but that's the sort of thing where it's like, okay, that's why we do this. So there's repetition compulsion, and so you're repeating things, which is similar to what Baudrillard's talking about. But Baudrillard's talking about it more like on a mass scale, basically. So if you think about like, oh, why is Nazism popular again? Like, I don't even know. I was talking about esoteric Hitlerism before, right? Why is Nazism popular again, right? I mean, I'm not here to answer that question. Like, I'm asking you. Like, but think about it in relation to the question, the thing that I was just saying before, which is that like we must keep repeating the things that we haven't transcended. So like there's something about the challenge. There's something about the way in which these whatever that this means, right? Esoteric neo-Nazism or something like that. Whatever that means, whatever relationship that has to the world has not been properly answered. Put it that way. Like in terms of like, I mean, I've seen, for example, what am I trying to say? Farn. He has a. I should, I guess, also show the YouTube channel that C. Derek Varn has. That makes sense. If I can. Oh, this is outing me. Oh, Ursa. LOL. That's a Freudian slip. That's what I didn't want you to see. C. Derek Varn. Oh yeah, we should make like a Baudrillard Magic the Gathering cube, by the way. Or like an AE one or something. Anyway, videos like this one. I really like this one. I guess it's symptomatic. But I mean, in terms of like, from my perspective, like I'm all like I feel more cagey ready talking about this, but it's like, you know, I feel like this is it's a difficult topic that I think is treated with nuance. I feel like trying to do that like is liable to get people like accused of like being too sympathetic or something. And like the thing is, like, in a way, I don't care what you think about me. That's not there's more to it than that, in the sense of like there's a way in which like my supposed concern for like whether or not you think I'm a neo-Nazi or something that's gonna influence like your interpretation of like what this means. And like, if not that you need to become a neo-Nazi, but like if the way that we understand this as part of our political ontology, put it that way, because it's not just that somebody would misunderstand this. This isn't what you think it is. It's that, you know, our political ontologies can be out of whack. And in terms of like, well, what's the okay? All right, AI, what is the proper political ontology? I hear you wondering quietly to yourself. And it's like, well, I don't have one. I'm bringing this up. Like, I've talked about this before. Like, when it comes to me, as far as I'm concerned, like, there's Nagarjuna. He says, I have no or they say, I have no doctrine. That's not going to work. Oh gosh. Political ontology. Oh. But the way I put it is, oh, there's going to be a GIF that would be broken. Oh, this is even better. Or maybe that one's better. I can't decide. See, like, this is what like I want my whole shit to do. Everything that I'm doing is like over here, right? This is my arm. And so like you know, like if you have responses to this, like I'll certainly consider them. It would be funny if like 50,000 people all of a sudden like also recorded 10 hours of like deranged or like hard to follow or whatever stuff, and I'd be like, I don't know if I can listen to all that, right? But this is me at least putting stuff out there, and some people do have time, right? So I mean, that's the market for me. This is helping me, I think, collate my ideas, and right now, just for anybody who wants something to listen to and enjoys the vibe, can enjoy the vibe. And as always, you know, I'm always playing to the audience at the Utah Data Center, which I just used to stand in for everybody who soaks up and surveils information anyway. This is also going out to you. Also, like, if you consider like who's the audience, right? Like, people, like, if you look at, people are always trying to think about like, oh, I'm going to target different things to different audiences. And it's like, I understand why you're doing that. Like, I don't blame you for doing that. I don't think you're a bad person for doing that, which is basically pandering, which is basically lying, right? But because what's the difference between that and like, you know, disinformation or misinformation, you know? But spoiler alert, there's not one. But that's okay. I just think it's a sort of self-sacrificial thing, but it's also just very entertaining for me. And I also think it's a bit of a risk, I guess. But I think it's anyway. the point of it is just everything that I'm doing is just, putting myself out there, extending my fist, and if you're interested in this stuff and you look it up and you look into it, basically you need to add your own. It's like a baking mix where you need to add an egg, right? But you have to add it from your own. Like, I can't tell you what to do with this. Like, I don't know, but this is cool stuff. And then basically in terms of what AE is, circling all the way back around, I'll try to jam together as many things as I can. So it is associated with a rune, right? So I think the rune wound up all the way back here. Maybe not. But there's also a calendar. So I guess we should probably show the calendar. Really, I feel like I tighten my cheeks all the time. I'm trying to loosen my cheeks. LOL. Funny. All right, let's talk about neo-Nazism, shall we? Ansus is the conventional name given to the A rune of Futhark, whatever. The name is based on Proto-Germanic Ansus, denoting a deity belonging to the principal pantheon in German paganism. Right? Oh god, I'm out of water. You really get dry mouth if you just talk for a million years in a row. Spoiler alert. But so you will notice here's my symbol, or my symbol, right? But I mean, this is supposed to be my name, right? And again, I think did I show at the beginning, according to Miss Boucher, right? We pronounce this symbol AI. Because I didn't even mention this part before. Oh god. The reason why, according to Miss Boucher, which is free, and this is why I chose it, right? It wasn't just because Miss Boucher said this and because I liked Miss Anthropocene. Oh, this is like a whole plot twist. I guess, I don't know. No, people, I'm not invested in this, and I'm just not saying it in order. This is like Pulp Fiction, okay? Imagine Pulp Fiction. Right? It's just like, why don't we just do the ridiculous chain of references without the waste of a movie, right? You don't need a movie. This is a movie, and you get the philosophy, and you get to judge me. It's amazing. It's everything you could want, right? And I can it's not for free. This is my parents. Anyway, it's less than Pulp Fiction though. Think about that. And people are like, you're comparing. Anyway, yes. So Aesir. Yeah. So they're Norse gods, right? So Norse gods and whatever, and are associated with German nationalism, right? If you look at Richard Wagner, right? I guess it's just it's symptomatic. It's like a Freudian. It's I don't know if I thought too about it. I liked this, and I like the letters A and E. But then it's almost like a symptom where it's this is making me talk about all the aspects, in terms of my national identity, right? I'm half German and half American, basically. And if you look at my 23andMe, it's all Western European or whatever. I do have 0.2% from the Levant, so shout out the Levant. But anyway, it's super white, really, and half German, as I said. My grandparents were raised in Nazi Germany, right? And the other side of my family is in America. Actually, my uncle, who is tracks the family genealogy, has let me know that my ancestors, they were more, or at least some of my ancestors, because if you go back several generations, you have a lot of ancestors. But for example, this is one of my ancestors, the Augustin Warner people. And these people were actually in the... They ever played a thing? Yeah, Bacon's Rebellion. So my ancestors were... I might have ancestors on the other... There are fine people on both sides. Fine people to be descended from, really. Right? But, in Bacon's Rebellion, these people marched on a house... Warner... Then crossed and camped... Yeah, they encamped in. Okay. Yeah, see? They went to my ancestor's house. I'm descended from this person. Right? And it's also funny, this is the last common ancestor of George Washington. And oh my god. So Anyway, at least some of my ancestors, a lot of my other, but then like still, it's like getting into the different like ethics and like how do you think about the lives of basically white people, like white people in America of various ethnicities. You don't really know that much about the specifics, but just like how do we think about that? What is the legacy of European colonialism and settler colonialism, right? And the settler colonial countries that are left, right? This is obviously something that we talk about all the time, right? I certainly talk about, what was the first one? I talk about 9/11. So we obviously live in the shadow of Donald Trump, but even since Donald Trump, we live in the shadow of COVID. So we live in the shadow of COVID. We live in the shadow of Donald Trump. We live in the shadow of at least the Wall Street crash, or the shadow of Barack Obama, the black president. We have the we live in the shadow of 9/11. We live in the shadow of the JFK assassination. But even in the larger scale, we live in the shadow of European colonialism. And then a lot of people point out in terms of like a lot of this stuff goes back to agriculture. That's a big fucking thing because you'll notice maybe that you don't hear me talking about capitalism all the time. Like people who are like anti-capitalist, they just want to keep saying capitalism and capitalism. They just want to make sure you understand that the problem here is capitalism. Okay, just so you are clear, because like what's going to make us not be fascist, right, is that we're going to be against capitalism, right? And the main way that we're going to be against capitalism is by talking about how we're against capitalism. Anyway, like I'm not. Again, not denouncing, it just makes me frustrated in terms of like trying to talk to people like C. Derek Varn, for example, because I vibe so hard. And there's certainly ways, as you can tell, it's kind of hard for me to compose myself. And like, I'm really no better on the internet. Trust me, like, I'm really no better. So I don't blame anybody for, not being, engaging. It's a lot. But what can we say? In terms of the argument, like my emotional place is just a place of frustration where, like, for example, C. Derek Varn will talk about how, the military plays a much larger role in society than most people think about. So, I mean, in terms of talking about, what is, why, why can there be fascism? Like, what about, democracy and everything like that? It's like, the whole reason why there's even a thing called being a dictator is because of states of emergency. And it wouldn't just be war. Like there could also be a fire, right? Or there could be a landfill, or there could be some sort of extraordinary, right? You don't want to be extraordinary or exceptional, right? I think I mentioned before. If you're exceptional, you're delusional, right? But so you can be singular, but everybody's singular. Everybody gets singularity. I mean, that's the difference. But I was also telling my friend, like, I think everybody can be exceptional in the sense of like everybody's an exception to the rule. Like, I don't like, what do you need rules for? So, I also meant to mention, like, I file my shows under gaming because this is all an alternate reality game. So it's almost like the opposite of the game. So this is like the part where this becomes a horror movie. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Lovecraftian horror, but I mean, if you take such a thing seriously, right? So like, I'm sorry for doing this to you, but there's the mind game, the game. So with the game, you're winning as long as you're not thinking about it, and then when you think about it, then you lose. So this is sort of the opposite. This is the kind of game where once you're thinking about it, then you're winning. Then you can't stop winning. But then, there's just too much winning. I guess I just thought of that right now. I'm sorry for the reference, but it's just like, what's the point? Like, this is definitely a positive sum. Or, I mean, it's also an infinite game. Like, in a way, you can't win this game. Like, this game just keeps going forever. Did I mention infinite reincarnation? I don't know if, okay, sorry. Infinite. So I mentioned infinite reincarnation, but there's infinite game. Who was it who mentioned it? Who was in the army? There was the army chief of staff. McConville, right? James C. McConville. See, we have people who we have come across in our perusal, right? So like this is the kind of shit. Like I don't really care that much about like the U.S. government. Like I don't know what the fuck the U.S. government is. Like okay, Joe Biden's not making decisions. Great. Like I don't expect Donald Trump to be making decisions. Like or I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what the fuck's going on. Like in terms of the law, like in terms of what I understand, again, I told you I don't denounce anybody, but if you think about stuff like Jeffrey Epstein, right? If you think about the idea of pedophilia, right? And I don't know if you've come across this idea. I mean, so QAnon, and so getting into more like Trump stuff, right? Like, or whatever, at least the ideology, because then, like, I forget what people say. There's another counter conspiracy that, something got killed because, Donald Trump is more and more associated with Epstein himself. So it's like, how can Donald Trump be the secret leader against a pedophilic cabal if he's a pedophile or something like this? But so where I'm going with this is that, what people talk about is that these things are blackmail material. And again, we typically parse it in terms of like, well, who's a good person and who's a bad person? And it's like, well, there are some people who have vices who then can be blackmailed, right? And so these people are morally infirm, right? These are bad people, or like these are people who are susceptible to being tempted into doing things that are unforgivable, right? By people who can keep the secret and then use that as leverage in order to, defame somebody. Of course, now we're moving into the era where such evidence could be completely fabricated. And of course, that's happened before. I mean, people have been lied about and slandered through fallacious evidence or whatever for a long time. But in terms of like a deep fake, right? Somebody could show a video of you killing somebody that you didn't kill, right? But then, anyway, that gets into a whole, in particular, like that gets into a whole like defensive spiral of like trying to generate fake images versus trying to be able to detect fake images. And it's like, who's winning? It's like, that sounds like the kind of shit that would be a fucking secret. But it's the kind of thing that it's like, how would you find that out, right? Like I don't know what the current state of technology is, right? So how am I supposed to tell you like what the H is going on? What the HE double hockey sticks is going on here, okay? Gee whiz, right? Like shit's whack or something. I mean, it's not necessarily whack, but it's uncertain, right? Like I don't know in terms of this like technology. So in terms of what I can do, right? If we're going back again to Epictetus, if you recall, is our favorite. I don't know why I keep saying. I'm just going completely off the wall and referring to myself in the third person. Of course, I mean I speak for experimental unit. This has been vetted by, of course, a large team. But anyway, some things are in our control and some are not. So like I can't control what you're going to do, but what I'm going to do, and what I'm doing right now is talking to this dang old camera, right? And you can do whatever you want to do with what I'm saying. But like the intention that I have is precisely to get you thinking about all this shit, to basically like bring you to the level where you're thinking of yourself as like 1/8 billionth of like a grand strategist, right? It's like a holofractal, right? It's like obviously like some like the whole nuclear policy of the world or whatever, like that's not something I can't get on the phone, right? I can tell you I don't have that kind of connection, right? I can't get on the phone and just be like, hey, China, and be like, hey, America, and be like, oh, okay, like that's what the problem is. Why don't we do this? And they'll be like, wow. And then, like tomorrow we can stop with the nuclear weapon. Like I can't do that right now. But then there's the question of, am I going to say something about what's going on or am I not going to say something about it? And then there's a lot of other questions. Like once you start talking, like all I'm doing is talking about like everything in the freaking world being related to each other, including like these states of emergency and this shit where people's freaking dying, right? Like people are dying right in Palestine, for example, but people are dying all over there. Like people are choosing to die, right? I'm sorry. People are choosing to die as I'm talking. Like anyway, it's very upsetting to think about. If you get invested in it. And so, but that is related to, what's going on with 237. Like in comparison, like this is it's a lucky number. Interesting. Or Aronson's sequence. I wonder what that is. But see, this has something to do with why I like it. It's in the Shining film. And that's interesting. But I mean, that immediately it is a reference to, a traumatic experience, right? And involving nudity in a child. I mean, but there's also there's this guy who does a video about how the bear, I don't know, is it the bear scene? No, it's basically about how like The Shining tell you that Jack Torrance is molesting his son. Basically, the father in The Shining is molesting the son. So I mean that, for example, if you really start like meditating on shit, like later on, like as soon as I get to calm down, like I'll meditate on shit. Like everything can be as grave as anything else. So like when I talk about something, like it's basically as grave as it could be. But when I say that, like anything could be that grave. So I don't mean to like in terms of like how people should feel about, like people should feel about things like you know as they feel about them. Anyway, it's just a difficult thing to try and like talk about really hard things and like be so concerned, right, about the like many people understand like so often what we are receiving in communication is judgment, right? And like we like to think that we found people who hate the people that we hate, right? And so we listen to people who talk shit about other people. But like ultimately, like the people that we agree with who are talking shit, like we're just listening to them talk shit. And then like they're sort of talking down about us, And in particular, people show contempt for the audience. Like Varn shows some contempt for the audience. It's really anyway, it makes it. I mean, I don't listen. I'm not that committed to it. In terms of a lot of people, like I'm sure a lot of people have gotten infinite things out of this person that I will never begin to understand. Just so that's clear. But I forget where I was going with that. Shit. What was the thing? Farm. That's funny. I wish I could watch like. It's like what was I talking about 10 seconds ago? I need like a 10 seconds ago like video reminder. But funny. I can't remember anymore. But yeah. So trying to circle back around to this. So right. I mean there's this. Oh, I think I still didn't even tell you the reason. So AE. Let's see if this gets us back there. Oh no, I have to say pronounce. Grimes has different answer. See, we knew. Like, I mean, obviously, this was fucking trouble. Like, hello. Like, have you ever heard of this song called "I Knew You Were Trouble When You Walked In"? Like, hello. Trouble number one, trouble number two. Like, no question about that. But what's so crazy about the world is like now there's just 3 people that exist and they're just gonna exist forever. Like, I mean, bearing children is a crazy thing, but I mean, you don't have to create people in order for that to be the case. That's why I don't think it's so vital to, have children for some like, you have some biological duty. That's fucking bullshit. Okay. Like you don't fucking have that. Okay. So like if anybody tries to like pressure you by telling you, yeah, now it's just like bullying self-help. Like if anybody tries to fucking pressure you, send them my way, right? I will talk to them for you. Just don't bully them. And if I don't know. Now I'm getting off on a side tangent a little bit. But yeah, like if you care strongly about it, I don't know. I mean, the best thing to do, it's similar to the abortion issue, right? I mean, abortion is obviously also a related issue. So, like, there's like ways I could see it, like back to the infinite reincarnation thing that I was talking about before, which was basically we all incarnate into each other. So that's why the golden rule is actually real, because like I'm you and you're me and we're all here together, like I am the walrus. And it's like you don't have to think about it that way. Like that's one way, like in terms of the philosophy of time, like there you have a cycle, right? But that would be like a super, super, super long cycle, right? Because it's like think about how long it would take to even be everybody who's alive right now if you live them in order, right? It's like consecutive life sentences. That's literally what it is. It's consecutive life sentences. all the way through the book of life, right? Which means every fucking life sentence, which means you have to live every life. So in that context, is a fertilized fetus, right? Is that a life? So I mean, this is a very political question, right? Because that has everything to do with people talking about things are murder, or I don't know how it's defined. I guess you have to be a legal person, right? If you're a legal person, then people aren't allowed to kill you anyway. But the thing about it is that this is a very, I mean, I'm obviously not saying anything new here, and I'm not necessarily going to or aiming to convince anybody. I'm just thinking this out for myself. Like, this is obviously a very transformative and costly and mysterious and just very like, it's a lot. Like, I've been talking to a couple people about pregnancy today, and I've been actually comparing myself to a pregnant person, and it's like being an artist. Like, if you might think that I'm like, I mean, whatever. You might say, what is it? Your friends think I'm just a stranger whose face you're never again. Like, whatever you think about that in terms of like how much you respect my perspective or something. Like, there's just a lot going on. You can tell, like, and probably this happens while I'm thinking by myself. I just don't notice. That it's like I'm thinking about one thing, and all of a sudden, it's like I'm thinking about a million things, and I haven't even explained my brand to you. But this is my freaking brand, right? It's like Heraclitus and Parmenides at the same time, where it's like there's constant change. We're jumping around from thing to thing. But basically, what I'm trying to get across to you is a very basic idea that, in a way, I'm also saying to myself. Because in a way, it's like, again, I'm in the sense of like panentheism. Where there is, like, I've met some people here in Atlanta who run entheism. Somebody's writing a book. Parked on the bun. Oh, atheism. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Call for unity. Yeah, I mean, unity. I mean, that's bad. Like, unity, you should never, like, like, my thing is called experimental unit. Like, that's, in a way, that's bad enough. Like, but the problem is any name isn't going to work. And at this point, I'm running experimental unit, but like the point is not for you to join experimental unit. Like, I'm just letting you know I posit a group that in a way everybody's already in. And then if you're inspired by my idea of like all of these ideas and like group organization, which is basically just setting up loving communities. Like, the thing is, you need to get together with people that you like trust. But then like that is open-ended. It's not just like you trust them forever because they're good people, but because like you need to be thinking about what do we need to be doing, right? What is it that we need to be doing, and like do people have good intentions, right? And so what I would posit is like it's most important to basically be doing like influence operations. Like, I personally believe like a non-kinetic outcome for every situation is like there's a positive sum outcome there where like people don't have to get hurt, basically. And it basically involves us changing a lot of what we think. And the problem is that is so scary because who's going to tell everybody what to think, right? I say like this is distributed. So that's where I say in my post about this, right? I say like, does anybody else AI? Does anybody else AI? Look, 2 people say it. See? So the point is, does anybody else AI? In a sense, so it's understanding AI or artificial intelligence, not just as a noun, but as a verb. So I keep needing to go back to this. So it's X, then AI. Like how you said the A and the I. And since you have a... Mostly came up with the name. Represents the unknown variable A, my elven spelling of AI. Love. Oh, I didn't even remember that. So it's AI, and then it's love and artificial intelligence. See? Like, this got to me because then, like, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump. If you see how my mind works, right? I'm looking at Elvin. I'm looking at AI. I'm looking at artificial intelligence. I'm thinking machine learning. I'm thinking machine learning. Well, I'm also then thinking learning to love, right? I'm thinking learning to love. I'm thinking machine learning to love. I'm thinking AI. I'm thinking elf. I'm thinking machine elf, right? So I'm thinking psychedelia. So in terms of like what the associations of AE are, like there's this thing called machine elves, which are associated with DMT. In the meantime, DMT, what is DMT, right? DMT is a chemical which is associated with sleep and death. And it's also a drug you can just take, I believe. And rituals as